do you think?
Look, we have a history with all of these social media, and Facebook, as also mentioned, is a very good example of their trending stories column that they said was the trending news of the day based on their algorithm. And then we realized that there was no real conservative sites, there was no conservative stories, there was nothing pro-conservative, and former editors came out and said that they routinely suppressed conservative news, things that conservatives would make them look good or would be of interest to conservatives, and then they had eventually shut down that entire framework of the trending stories.
Let me pick up on this and ask you a question.
But
much of it has to do, according to Google, with the idea that if you are searching something, they give you what they call accredited sites, like big newspapers that they have a sense of trust in their content, as opposed to giving them simply opinionated sites that are, let's say, tilted to the conservatives.
But that's the problem, is that when you're a liberal and you see a liberal site, that is the one that is legitimate to you. And you're going to view an opposing website in a different way because you don't agree with it. So if you're going to rank certain websites, you're going to rank them based on whether or not it looks like real life to you. That, look, if you're a liberal or a conservative, you're not going to look at your own material as being biased because it's what you also believe. And this is why when you've got 85% of American media identifies effectively as liberal, as not conservative, and then you're going to have a Google determine which sites are going to be more legitimate. They're going to rate more legitimate the sites that they agree with, or that looks like their worldview.
And automatically, it seems to me like saying there's no truth, there's no facts, there's no accurate news coverage in the country, so you just give me liberal opinion or give me conservative opinion. Is that what we're saying?
No, I think you're talking about this is the hottest issue in the country, and there's no easy answer. This is the stem cell research of our generation, of this decade, because everyone thinks that social media is the problem for their own reason. I don't necessarily have the reason, but Amazon, Google, Facebook, and Twitter, we have to come up with something that'll work. I think fundamentally they actually want to get it to work. I think there's legitimate criticism on the whole side. My frustration is when, for example, CEO Jack Dorsey comes to Capitol Hill to go in front of the Energy Committee on September 5th.
Next week.
Is there going to be anyone who's an expert to be able to ask him the types of questions that are going to move the conversation forward?
Or are we going to see a bunch of statements? Those hearings are unsatisfying?
Well, I know you're being sarcastic, but we need somebody in the middle that is unbiased to say, here's an idea of what to do, because lawmakers who belong to a party are not capable of coming up with an answer.
Well, by the way, Brian, Larry Kudlow said today, well, he's looking at the possibility of regulating them. And I think it's...
I just don't know where you start.
Well,
How
I don't know.
You do that?
But that is so shocking to me that he would suggest the government now...
Especially Larry Kudlow.
Yeah.
Right. What
I was at his birthday
especially
party.
Larry Kudlow. I mean, there's a free market guy, and conservatives typically are not for more regulation. I would add that, so at 1:40 p.m. today, before the daily briefing, I checked Google News to see what was there. And the number one story was a CNN story about debunking a Trump myth of some sort. CNN Money story was about how Google is rigged against conservatives based on the president's tweet. And the third story was a Fox News story about Tiger Woods. And I think we're going to talk about that later. So I think that there's a lot of room for this algorithm to be manipulated. And all of these sites are privately held companies.
And they're powerful.
But they also would say to you, it doesn't make sense for us to alienate half of the country when they're trying to make money. Remember, it was Michael Jordan said Republicans buy shoes too. So they're going to try to make a free market argument next week.
Well, Greg, so I was surprised to see that the president's going after Google. He had a bad week, and I guess he does his rage Googling.
That was last week.
And says, oh, my God, look, they've got negative stories here from New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal. I don't like these stories. Give me some conservative. But here's Trump. Back in July, he says the European Union is fining Google, and they're one of America's greatest companies.
Oh, right.
But today, it's a different story.
That's right.
Well, I mean, it surprises you that Trump changes his opinion? I mean, it's been going on for 2 years. I think what Google is guilty of everyone else in the media, they're chasing words and not deeds. The deeds are good news. We have an 18-year high in optimism right now. That's not being reported. If you went onto Google and Googled Mexican trade, you would have gotten the top stories about the awkward phone call. You wouldn't have got the Mexican trade story. And he's just like us. He Googles his name and he gets mad when there's bad news. If you Google kill meat, the first thing you're going to get is hairpiece.
Right.
Or just Google kill meat and hairpiece, because then you'll see what happens.
No, but
if
99% of the stuff on us is negative.
Yeah. And I'm used to it. And if you look at Google Doodles, which I love, instead of Easter, they'll have an activist. Instead of Christmas, they'll do some kind of festival. Instead of Burning Man, they'll do Burning Man instead of Lou Dobbs' birthday. They are the king of virtue signaling. You asked, why would you alienate half the population? It's to keep activists at bay. They would rather alienate half the population than have somebody come after them and say, you're bigoted, you're sexist, you're racist. They need to do a Google search on wisdom, because right now what they're doing is they're helping China in their AI, correct? But they're leaving, they want to leave helping the military and making more precise drones that actually save lives.
So I have a quick question for you.
They let go of that
about
contract.
Alex Jones, because we know that some of these sites pushed Alex Jones and his conspiracy theories off on the idea that it's hate speech.
Right.
Why wouldn't you want to support that, Greg?
I think Alex Jones is hate speech. The same way I feel about Louis Farrakhan.
Okay. ESPN.